Right, welcome back to Work in Progress, and thank you again to Real Time Recruitment and Version 1 as major sponsor for supporting this event. So, we've had two great sessions so far, focused on the future of the workplace and ways of working and the hiring demands of the tech sector. The world of work is changing, from the future of workspaces and ways of working, through to future jobs and talent planning, from commitments to diversity, inclusion, and social purpose, through to meeting the hiring demands of the growing tech sector.
Good stuff. First of all, I should say it's not like Doctor Who and Neve's turned into Fran. But I was just going to say, Neve, thank you ever so much for this morning. I thought you were brilliant. For those that are in the room with us here, round of applause for Neve as well. Thank you. So you can probably see from my balding head, there's only so long I can do this before I definitely have to be behind the camera. This is as much about championing new talent, and we've got with Fran and Neve two great presenters, and I think at some point I need to be hiding behind the camera rather than out here. So Fran, love you to be with us today as well. It was like the Ant and Dec last time, wasn't it, me and you?
Yeah, Richard and Judy.
Richard and Judy, we've done that joke with Neve as well.
No.
So you can't do
That's
that
what
anymore.
I get for missing the first session.
What about thank you, Holly and Phil. Yes, absolutely.
Phil. I'll take Holly, yeah.
Happy days. Yeah, we're talking about inclusion and diversity in this session, and we've had a session first, which is about working remotely and community and people coming together. Really, there was a touch on there of diversity and inclusion. Then we talked about kind of tech talent and finding tech talent. And then that was really kind of talking about community, culture, purpose. And again, we're talking about diversity and inclusion. So it kind of seemed natural that when we're leading on to this, which is kind of looking at the initiatives, the people, the programs, but also obviously looking at different areas of diversity and inclusion as well, and like how we can drive more people into the workforce. Sadly, I've got to tell you what happened. I put this post up on Facebook and we promoted it on Facebook, and I promoted it to Dublin, London. About 6 comments. What about us? This ain't for me. Here we go again. Diversity, inclusion. And I really wanted to kind of like pull back. I wanted to comment. I'm going to ask for some advice in this because I didn't know what to do. Do I comment back to those people? Do I engage with them, try and educate them? And diversity inclusion is for everybody that's listening in. It's not just for a certain type of person. It's for everybody that's within the society. So it's just as much for me as a white, middle-class, bald-headed, glasses-wearing man as it is for Fran. And I think that's what we need to get across in this session, that this is about how we can make a workforce that's inclusive for everybody. So yeah, thank you ever so much for our sponsors on this session, which is Pulsar. Pulsar is a website who promote STEM diversity and maps the support across the island of Northern Ireland, sorry. It's the home of the Northern Ireland Wise Hub, which was launched last year with the Department of the Economy. So it's awesome to have Pulsar involved, and thank you for your support in this session. What's coming up?
So in this session, we'll be hosting a panel including leading diversity and inclusion focused leaders. And we will hear from 2 startups with a focus on the future of work, business, and the workforce space. But first up, let's introduce to the stage Virginia Mendez. Virginia is a children's author, public speaker, and co-founder of The Feminist Shop, a brand educating on gender equality through products, books, and free content and recommendations. Virginia has delivered workshops in schools, corporate, and host events in diversity festivals. Her book on how to parent beyond gender bias is going to be published in April 2022.
Good stuff, Virginia. Thank you so much for being in the room with us. Our first real life keynote. We were supposed to have 2 on Zoom, jumping in from wherever they were in the world, and 2 in person. Unfortunately, one of them, for circumstances, couldn't be there, and they're in Zoom. So you are our star. Real life kind of keynote speaker. So thank you ever so much for being with us today. I'll let you obviously go. And then what we've got is the audience will be WhatsApping some questions in. So hopefully you can answer any questions that come in as well. So I'll pass over. Thank you.
Hi, thanks for having me here. And I don't know if I can have the things behind, like my presentation. Yeah, hi. So I call this talk, okay, but does it really matter? Because that's what I get, no matter what I talk about, feminist related, that's the question that keeps coming back, like, but does one thing really matter? And well, the answer is obviously yes. Well, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Virginia, and as you can get from the accent, I'm Spanish, but following my childhood dreams, I married a Northern Irish man, moved to Belfast, all dreams come true. I have 2 kids, and well, I guess I was very ambitious when I was like in uni. I did 2 degrees, studied a master, got the job with the Big Four, all those things that your parents want for you. And, and then I became more ambitious and decided that I was going to change the world. But not by myself, I'm not that delusional. So it started with my children's book. When I was pregnant, I wrote a book for my kid. I didn't know if it was going to be a boy or a girl by then, but I thought I want to write a book telling them that, gender stereotypes were not enough, were not good enough, and I would not let them limit them. So I wrote my children's book. It's bilingual. It's called Mika Lolo, and now it's translated in 5 languages. And at the moment, I'm actually crowdfunding for the second book of the same collection, which is about consent. So I shameless invite you all to go to the Kickstarter and pledge and buy your copy in advance. But then I felt that that wasn't enough. So my husband and I co-founded the Feminist Shop, and it's a brand and it's a hub in which we try to make products that are ethically produced, but they're conversation starters, like my Boundaries Are the New Black t-shirt. And there's a lot of recommendations and articles. And then I've done some workshops and public speaking, and I got a book deal to talk about parenting and how we parent beyond the gender bias. So if there's anything feminist related, I'm there. And as I said, every time I talk about something, it doesn't matter if it's small or big. There's somebody with the, but does it really matter? But aren't we bringing things too far this time? So because the whole event today is about work, I wanted to focus in why it matters. If I ask any company if they have a problem with diversity, they normally think, no, like we're not like the others. We treat everybody the same. They always think that their colleagues and the peers are all very happy. But there's a lot of things happening in the background that maybe even the women in the company are not seeing, but there's like a sense of it. So we all have this kind of bias, even if we believe that we don't. So we tend to rate the performance of women less. So for example, when this year one of the most elite universities in France could not rely on the anonymous or in the oral piece of the exam, and they have to rely only in the anonymous written one, the admission of women raised from 40% to 80%, and that has happened in many places when we talk about anonymous exams. In terms of likability, there's a big study, for example, in the Columbia University, in which the students are given the same exact CV, but one is Howard and the other one is Haiti. And they ask them to talk about what they think of those candidates. And they always think that Howard is really cool and nice to work with. But Heidi, no, she's aggressive, she's assertive, she would not be a good colleague. And it's exactly the same CV. So it's our perception. And that one, it's a bit of a catch-22 one, because the women that come across as nice, they're also perceived as less competent. So we're always navigating that. Am I being too assertive and then people are not gonna like me? Or am I being too nice and they're gonna think I'm stupid? And it's a lot of mental load and it's emotional load that we don't see because we just do it. We're just always measuring our tone and trying to read the room and toning us down and trying to toning us up and remember, all the things that we've heard, but it just comes in the back and it just takes time and energy, and it doesn't let us maybe performs in a freely way as we should. In terms of attribution, again, we tend to be less credit for success and more blame for failure, even when they're mixed couples. Things like women tend to be called 30% less time whenever they have the same skills in the CV, and there was a study made by LinkedIn recently. And things like affinity, we tend to mentor and sponsorship people that look like us, and with white men holding most of the power positions. It's not out of badness, it's not it's just a certain affinity. You just train to gravitate to people that you feel related to. So it's very difficult to organically change those things. It has to be proactively trying to change. You have to be getting out of your comfort zone and trying to fight that instinct that you don't feel anything wrong with it because it's just there. And same with maternity. Like, there is a lot of pre-assumptions of how maternity is going to affect a woman's career and how our interests are going to change, how much we're going to be willing to give or not. And that bias starts affecting us even before we're mothers. Even people that do not want to be mothers, they have no interest, they're still perceived as there's some risk, because I'm going to assume that they want to be mothers, and that once they are mothers, they're going to change their priorities and they're not going to be given the same. So there's all that understanding women almost as a risk. But we are in a candidate scenario at the moment. Like, there is a big lack of, companies are struggling to find talent and to retain talent. And we were talking in the other session about that culture, that creating a culture. And it's the time to go a little bit farther and understand what we're doing. I think a good way to understand how diversity affects, and it's very important to say that I'm just talking about women here, but we cannot understand diversity without intersectionality, like Black women, trans women, disability, neurodiversity, all those things not only add up, but multiply each other. So all those sections, everything just, get multiplied, and it gets obviously much more pressed. But a good way to see it is through the famous Maslow pyramid of needs, but apply at work. So from the very bottom of the pyramid, that lack of diversity and that lack of approach shows up. So physiological needs, food, water, warmth. There's worth mentioning that, for example, the offices tend to be regulated to the temperature of the man. So all women in the office tend to be freezing. There's no right provisions in the bathrooms, those kind of things that are just, but does it really matter? Well, it's just there, it's just adding up, and it's another layer of things. Security and safety. I think the newspapers yesterday were all blasted with that new case of a man abusing somebody in the company and getting away with it. We've all seen the Me Too big explosion. And what is worse, the response of some men has been like, now I feel insecure to be around women, which is very confusing. So even doing extra hours and finish work at night, and how do you feel about returning home and getting public transport? Do I better get an Uber at this time? How does it affect if my colleagues are staying for after drinks? How much should I drink? And which position is this putting me in? Belongingness and love needs. Women tend to be interrupted up to 3 more times by other men and by women. We all know that women apply to works whenever they meet 100% of the criteria, while men apply with 60%. And I was talking about it with Chris, my husband, and he was like, why would you wait for 100%? And I was like, why would you apply only for 60? So it does happen. I think we were both really shocked that the other was. So yeah, it all obviously affects to who we come in terms of esteem, the prestige, the feeling of accomplishments, and finally the self-realization. So we all want the same, and I'm not saying there are no women realized in the workplace. Of course, there are plenty, but why our journey to get there, it's different. Why it comes with a lot of extra layers of just one small thing here and another one there, and I don't want to make a big fuss. And those are the things that are important to perceive as a whole, because yeah, maybe we see them in one by one, yeah, but we do have a problem. And again, and I cannot say this enough, I'm just talking about women, and as a white woman, I understand how privileged I am and how easy things are for me. So it's always better if we focus in who have it really bad, and by fixing that, we'll all benefit. So what can we do then? We need to stop seeing diversity and inclusion as a checklist. I mean, we need to genuinely care. And the first step is to understand that we might have a problem, that we might be biased, that we are not perfect. And and that it's in our own benefit to get this thing right, because we are missing out talent and the cultures of the company could be much richer. And there is something good in the checklist. The checklist should be the framework and should be the excuse to do the work, but that's not the work. The checklist is not the work, and really caring and listening to the people and making real changes is where we need to head. So that was me.
Maybe come and join us on the sofa for a second. Is that all right? And then we can ask you a couple of questions. If I that's the microphone. So come around, come around. I was just going to say, I would obviously questions coming in from the audience. It'd be great if obviously any questions could come in. But one question I had for you is based on us advertising for this event and some of the responses that came back, which was, here we go again, like you mentioned at the start of your presentation. Unfortunately, something's worse than that, which I don't really want to repeat, but I didn't know what to do. And we have this situation now where you can't be passive. You can't just sit there and say nothing, but at the same time, I've got a small business. How do I respond to those things while I'm trying to operate my business at the same time? My thought was to ask them what they actually meant. And I didn't know whether that was the right response. So for example, in the panel that we have someone that's representing in terms of neurodiversity. We have someone who's representing based on ethnicity. We have someone who's basing it on gender. We have someone that's talking about it from the angle of disability. And my angle was to try and get to what that person meant by saying, for example, to start with, well, my dad had a car accident when he was 39 and ended up with a head injury. I would have loved for the work environment to be more inclusive with his needs when he unfortunately lost his job. Is that what you mean when you say, here we go again? And I wanted to get to the root of the problem. Would that have been the worst thing to do, the best thing to do? What would your advice have been?
I love them. What do you mean by then, especially with sexist joke or any kind of bigotry, like oh, what do you mean by that? And get them explain themselves, because there's always that uncomfortable moment. It's like, I know I should not say that. The fact that I know is probably, good enough to just maybe rethink why I shouldn't. And also shift a little kind of the narrative. There's ever a troll, please send them my way. I love arguing with trolls online. So just, that's my thing. Everybody has a hobby. And I'm not even very insulting. I'm really kind with them. But yeah, I agree that we cannot be bystanders, and we have to say something, and especially if we can bring it into positive and tones. But I also think that not everybody has the time or the capacity to respond to everything. I mean, yeah, unless you're a freak like me, I can see why sometimes the easier thing is like, look, wherever, I'm gonna keep doing my job. But yeah, I think if you have the energy and if you have the capacity just to challenge it and be like, what about diversity is bothering you? Or because there is that feeling of it's against me. It's, this is against me, and there we go again. I'm the bad guy again. But yeah, what about it? What is it in them? What in the status quo is that it's upsetting it? But yeah, send them to the feminist shop. I'll fill them in. That's my advice.
Fran, any questions or thoughts from your side?
Do you know what? Like, I'm with you in everything you said, and I agree, and I advocate for feminism and all it stands for. So I feel like it would probably be more interesting to maybe look at the WhatsApp questions, or if there's anybody that maybe like challenges your thoughts, it'd be maybe more interesting to hear it from that point of view, because I feel like with Alistair and I like to think that I'm open-minded, and Alistair as well. And I like to hope that people watching this event are too. But it would be interesting to see if there's any other questions from the audience.
Yeah, this is a great question. Do you think that companies and male leadership within them consciously steer away from meaningful conversation around diversity and inclusion, gender recognition and equality, because of a fear of not being able to address it properly, or because they don't really appreciate the issue that it really is? That's a great question.
Yeah, I think there is a matter of probably feeling like, okay, who am I to talk about it? So I'm just not going to talk about it at all. And I've seen that before, a lot of men saying like, well, I don't think I want to, I don't want to occupy this space, so I'm just going to hide it under the carpet. Um, but there is so much power in allyship. There is so much, um, there's so much to do in role models, and a lot of companies are led by men. I think there are more Johns than women leading FTSE 300 companies. So there is a lot of male leadership that can show up as men and deciding that the matter is important, and you can hire people to educate you on the topics. You can have people in your company and pass them the mic. You can listen to the workers that in your company at any level and listen to them. So no, I think if you really care, even if you feel like you're not the right person, you will make it happen. You can create that space for make it happen.
Yeah. But I'm thinking of Black Lives Matter, and obviously one of the things that I saw quite a lot on LinkedIn, which I thought was really powerful, was that a lot of corporates were getting involved in the conversation. So they could say they were talking about diversity. You mentioned like the tick box in a sense, but then leading voices within the Black tech industry and scene were saying, well, apart from talking about it, show us your stats. What are they actually like in reality? How many Black women and men do you have in leadership positions? And I think that we can't just talk about it. We have to make sure that our organizations are leading by example as well. And I think that's one of the things that we saw very proactively, and I think that's a good thing. Let me just bring up one more question from the audience, and forgive me, again, I could talk all day about this. The other thing that was mentioned, and this might be something that happened or not, but during Black Lives Matter, it was like a lot of, for example, white people saying, well, I didn't know about this, can you tell me about this? And the response was, go and learn yourselves, then come back, because you should already know that information. Don't ask me stupid questions. And is that something that you find sometimes you still get, those stupid questions, when really we should be at the point where we've already read those books or understood and gone away and learnt ourselves?
Yeah, and I think it's also that then they feel like the conversation, not only whenever, I feel like a lot of people that ask those questions, they also don't do it in the sense of learning. They're like, and my opinion is going to be as valid as yours. It's like, well, no, because I do happen to dedicate a lot of time in reading and researching and listening, and you're basing this in how you threaten you feel for to what I'm saying, and the same way. I understand, and I'm going to put myself in the other side. But whenever I listen to Black voices, I listen to Black voices, and it's not about me asking questions. It's about there's enough resources up there, and there's plenty, and there's amazing voices educating on us, and our role is to listen and not to. I mean, one thing is to ask, but most times those questions are challenges. It's like, I'm going to challenge what you're saying because I didn't feel it like that, or I feel threatened, or I'm not sure about this. But it's a matter, I think we are in a position that it's never been before, in which, things are changing, and think people are asked to shut up and listen, and, give the space to the ones that have something to say. And it's like, it's not a conversation between equals. It's the time to listen to the ones that are in that side of the story.
100%. One last question. Fran, forgive me, I'm just asking all these questions because they're great on WhatsApp as well. Patrick says, how do you measure your business outcomes of the positive or negative change of societal bias? What metrics do you use? That's like way over my head, so I'm hoping that you can kind of, that's too good a question.
That's a very good question, Patrick. That's what you say when you don't know what to answer, right? I think, well, that sounds very corporate, and I'm sure there's a lot of tools. I think there's a new app by Global Equality Collective, in which everybody in the company can have free access, and there's a lot of tools, and there's self-assessment and a report about how the company is benchmarked with other things. So there are things like that and great initiatives like that. If you want something more technical,
Yeah.
I guess. But if you're a smaller company, or if you have the capacity, just listen and see, just listen to the people, read your stats and see, like, it's my company really diverse enough? How does my board look like? What are we spending the money in? What things are we considering relevant? And, just, I don't think it's something that easy, or that, metric is more about, what is the culture of the company looking like, and is it more or less aligned with where the society is going?
Yeah, perfect. Fran, any last thoughts from yourself, or a final question?
No, I think that was so comprehensive, and
Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. And I think we all have a lot to take away from that conversation in terms of actionables going forward, and thinking about how we can be more open to these conversations, and how we can bring it more into the workplace now, in line with the future of work. And it is a work in progress. And yeah, I think that was a great chat. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, round of applause, please. Thank you. So we'll just be one short minute for an advert break, and then we'll be back for our panel. Yes, hello. Sarah, how are you? You well? And Stephen, lovely to see you both. Thank you ever so much, Zoom people, for joining us. Isn't it amazing to have you all with us? Leanne, lovely to see you. Diana as well. Bukola as well, lovely to see you. So thank you ever so much for joining us. Hopefully you got the first 10-15 minutes of that session as well. And you can understand where we're going with this. This is around the workplace, people within the workplace and workforces, and how we can shape how we work and live together much better than it is potentially right now. So I'm delighted to have you all with us. I'm just going to introduce all of the panel, if that's okay. So obviously this is a hybrid event. The audience that's in the room, if you give out a little cheer, audience in the room. Oh my God, that was terrible. Do it again. Yeah. Actually, it's that kind of like just after lunch, kind of like the sandwiches are kicked in. There's a couple of people back. Come on, right? So that's good. We've got the energy back up again. Thank you ever so much, Virginia, again, obviously for joining us for the first the kind of presentation there. Thank you ever so much, obviously, to Pulsar, who's the sponsor for this session. I'm just going to introduce obviously half of the speakers. In fact, Fran, you go first. Is it not you? Sorry.
So we have Bukola Adiza, who is the founder and CEO of Career Masterclass, which is a leading online career development platform focused on enabling the career growth of ambitious professionals by teaching the practical skills that they can use to build and enjoy a successful career. We also have Chris Lynch, who is a filmmaker and presenter of BBC's The Disability Paradox. Chris has recently set up One in Five, a pioneering social enterprise that is developing engaging video content around the disabled community for both digital and broadcast.
Good stuff. Great meeting us as well here on Zoom is Leanne Evans and Sarah Watts from Ocean, which is the Wellbeing Workplace. Forgive me, I hope I've pronounced that correctly. Gillian Gregg, who's in the room with us from the Royal Academy of Engineering, and Gillian is the Senior Regional Business Development Manager for Northern Ireland. Stephen Rice, the founder and CEO of Talent Census. Stephen, I believe you're over in the States at the moment. So what time is it there?
It is 7:32 a.m.
Yeah, well, we've had loads of coffee, mate. So I'm sorry. Obviously, Talent Census is a workforce development platform helping those furthest from the labour market to find and keep jobs while removing unconscious bias from the process. I kind of want to know, Stephen, I'm going to start with yourself before we go anywhere else. why are you doing that out in the States and not in Northern Ireland? What's holding you back doing that here, or are you doing it in Northern Ireland but you're just all over the place?
So it's mostly circumstance. You know, we ended up getting quite a lot of momentum here in the United States, and obviously, you know, issues around diversity transcend borders. So there's no specific geographic reason. But here there are you know, huge challenges around staffing and finding and keeping the right talent. And coming with that is a huge issue around diversity and inclusion as well. So it's just a bit of circumstance and a lot of fortune, I suppose.
Perfect. Good. Are we in fear of possibly just putting diversity and inclusion down to gender and ethnicity? And I wanted to ask Chris that question. What is 1 in 5 about, and why does that matter in terms of inclusion and diversity?
Yeah, well, funny you say that. The 1 in 5 name comes from the statistic that, believe it or not, 1 in 5 people in society live with some type of disability, be that a learning or physical disability. So it's a huge segment of the population. And although it's you know, certainly the biggest in terms of the minority groups in society, it's also the biggest in terms of underrepresentations in so many sectors. So in terms of, you know, the industry that I work in film and TV, that certainly is the case, and we're having some really good conversations with the likes of NI Screen at the moment to try and drive that forward. But you know, 1 in 5 is an organisation that certainly helps push diversity, but it does that with two different sort of core strands. The first is where we are looking to engage with medium to large enterprise and big brands, and to go out and shoot film content around disability diversity to help them really support and demonstrate their commitment to disability diversity. So, you know, it could be anything from, say, a piece where we're showcasing someone who's a leader in their organization and they're a real champion, but they so happen to have a disability. So we can go out and maybe do a feature on them. And it's not about, you know, and very much, you know, trying to get away from this tokenistic sort of element. You know, it's trying to put a creative spin on it and be innovative in terms of how we shoot that content and how we deliver that. And then the second element to 1 in 5 is we have set out a mission to create the largest platform of disability-led content. And to do that, you know, we have been engaging and recruiting a number of different influencers and contributors from all over the UK and Ireland in various different areas that can shoot and produce content for us. So it could be about relationships, it could be about business, entrepreneurship, mental health, fitness, you name it. So that's certainly lacking in terms of what we see in terms of YouTube content even at the moment. And really we're focused on bringing that up and really showcasing that. So those are the sort of 2 elements to 1 in 5 and what we're doing. So we're in a startup stage ourselves, and we're growing, but yeah, we've set ourselves some big goals, but I think, you know, certainly now is the time. I mean, there hasn't been, talking about all these various different areas of diversity, there's never been a time in modern life where all these conversations are being had and there's a spotlight on so many different areas of diversity. So it's really encouraging for us and obviously for everyone else.
Yeah, brilliant. I'm going to pass you over to Fran in 1 second for the next questions, but I want to ask Bukola. I remember UK Black Tech did some really important work around stock images, because there was a shocking lack of images that represented Black men and women in the workplace. And they did some sterling work, and we supported them in promoting that to our audience. Is it fair to say that you can't be what you can't see? And how are you helping in that approach, obviously with your own business?
Brilliant. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I mean, what you said is absolutely spot on. So from my own career, so my background has been financial services, and I've worked at very senior levels across some of the world's biggest financial services organizations. And it came to a point where I had to be comfortable in myself with being the only Black person in rooms, in senior rooms. And when I say comfortable, that means, you know, I wasn't comfortable with it as a matter of sort of, you know, societal justice, but in terms of, for me to progress, I had to become used to being the only Black person around the room. And did that have an impact on my progression? Yes, it did. And then you have to think about all the other people, all the other Black people specifically that come into organizations, either at graduate levels or at more junior roles within the organization. And then you come in, you know what it's like when you get a new job. You come in, you think, okay, if I do a great job, I'll be able to get promoted. And then as time goes on, it suddenly dawns on you that actually the people who progress in the space are not people that look like you. They're not people that have your kind of name. They're not people that talk like you. And so what that sort of starts telling you tacitly is that this place is not for people like you. And so when people say you really cannot become what you cannot see, I would say that's true. Or even if you become what you cannot see, is infinitely harder. It's a lot harder for you, because your motivation will have to come from elsewhere. Your motivation will have to come from outside the organization, and sometimes outside of what you see within the society. And so that's why we do the work we do at Career Masterclass, because from my own lived experience and the lived experiences of other people within our community, we see that Black people specifically have a hard time progressing within corporate spaces. And the issue is not really one of attraction, because when you go into a lot of big workplaces and a lot of big corporate places, you see them at the most junior levels, right? You see them at analyst and associate levels. As you then become more senior, if I take the analogy or the example of financial services or banks, once you hit that VP level, you can, as a Black person, is almost like getting to the next level as director is like, going to the moon, and getting to an MD role is like going to Mars. Like, you can as well forget about it. So that is where we come across what we call that frozen middle phenomenon. And that is why representation matters. That is why role model pieces matters, because I can remember when I was at Barclays and I was one of the only 2 Black female MDs, my desk and where I sat in the organization was like, it was like a town hall of Black people all day. Like, the junior people would just seek me out and they would say to me, we first needed to know that you existed. We've heard about you, but we wanted to know that you existed. Plus, people have told us you actually wear braids, and your name is not anglicized. Your name is very much Bukola Adisa, very Nigerian, very African. So how have you done it? How have you been able to do it? And so that's why that role model piece is important, because for those people in that organization at the time, seeing a woman from their background who looks like them, speaks like them, make it as one of the very few Black MDs, it said to them that, okay, then if she can do it, I can do it as well. So it is really important that we see ourselves even in advertisement on TV, even like you said, in stock images, in advertising, in marketing, and more importantly, in senior roles in organizations, because until that pipeline starts to thaw, that frozen middle pipeline starts to thaw, we will continually talk about this and say, oh, we just can't find them. And I'm sure my panelists like Stephen will be able to tell you, because some organizations still use that trope, or we can't find them, we don't know where they are, but they are out there, and they're out there in abundance. You just need to know where to look, or you need to be a little bit more less disingenuous in actually looking for them. So that role model piece is absolutely critical and is very important, at least from my own experience.
Yeah, and Bukola, thank you for talking about role models. And it actually leads on to the question I was going to ask, which I'm happy to open up to the whole panel. I suppose one of the reasons you started, each of you doing what you're doing, is because there was a lack of support in place. So what steps can employers take to create future workplaces that support and accommodate employees with disabilities, or support more diversity in the workplace, whether that be physical, mental? What steps can these employers take? You mentioned role models, which is great. Is there anything else you would like to offer up in that one?
Yeah, I think having conversation and just opening up dialogue to start off with is a really good starting point. I think the challenge always with disability is there's a sort of stigma and a taboo around it, and people are maybe uncomfortable and afraid to talk about it. And I think that's why it hasn't, it doesn't get the same sort of spotlight when we're talking about a number of various different issues in society and different things, because it has sort of been brushed under the carpet traditionally and historically. So I think it's great that certainly a lot of organizations are taking the approach, and as we heard earlier on about this sort of this sort of checklists and things like that that are being put in place yes, granted, a lot of these things aren't actually happening in a very genuine way. They are, very, very much on face value, and a lot of organizations are still doing it because they feel that they need to, that they the disconnect here is with the disabled community. And I think encouraging more people with disabilities into employment has to come from a genuine want to find someone that has really good skills, that the employer will value their position in the company, and reaching out to show how that opportunity is available in terms of, we've talked earlier on about, virtual workspaces and various different ways that we can, increase capacity in terms of, digitally and not just in a face-to-face sort of world. So I think that, I mean, in terms of getting more people within the disabled community into employment and increasing skill sets within businesses, yes, that's a great asset to start off with. But yeah, I think, it's a starting point, and just having, look, let's face it, a lot of people are going to get it wrong. And I mean, there's a big issue around language. What do you say? What terms do you use around disability? What's right, what's not? And, it's okay to get it wrong. It's not a case that, and for me personally, now I don't speak on behalf of all the disabled community, but, for me personally, I accept that, people will get it wrong first time and they'll not exactly maybe use the right terminology or language. That's no problem. It's just about having that starting point where you introduce a conversation into someone in the workplace and taking it from there. And people will be open and very welcoming. So
I'm gonna then, like, because I think the point to this session is absolutely about identifying the different areas where we need to improve, but then finding out more about initiatives as well that are making that change, which is 1 in 5, for example. Obviously, Gillian's work, obviously within Northern Ireland, obviously your STEM work. And I wanted to kind of touch upon, obviously, Sarah and Leanne, the work that you're doing with your organization, because one of the things that came out of the pandemic was everyone starting to talk about wellness and well-being and, oh, we must look after our staff. But you've taken a slightly different slant on that from the outset of the creation of those programs. So I'd love you to tell us a little bit more about that, because I think that's a really important initiative for us all to learn from as well.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having us. And it's so inspiring to hear all of the conversations so far. So yeah, we are Ocean Workplace Wellbeing. Our company was born about a year ago after the murder of George Floyd, the tragedy that came about that, and really coming together as women of colour, Sarah and I, and supporting other women of colour who were going through all of the emotions that were coming up, and the sense of just feeling really raw and really vulnerable at that time. We started to realize through that experience how often sometimes these things happen in life, where you do need that safe space, where you do need the people around you who recognize what is going on, where you do need specialist support. And that is what we do with Ocean, and it's what we seek to do. It's evolved, and we have this idea of providing inclusive wellness, which is what we're all about. But it's really about identifying each individual's need in the workplace. We can't have a cookie cutter solution for everything. There are different needs that every employee has. We want to empower people to find their voice in the workplace and really give them the specialist support that they need for their individual needs, whether that is race, gender, based on neurodiversity as well. But it's about finding that solution that works for individuals.
So why, and this is me playing devil's advocate, why does a wellness program differ, for example, I don't know, someone who's based in Northern Ireland who comes from, say, a economically poor background, compared to, say, a Black lady who's based in London? How do you approach that to kind of shape the wellness program in a sense that, and why does it differ?
Yeah, so it differs because their individual experiences are different. We, for example, at Ocean, we provide inclusion circles, which are safe spaces for people, underrepresented groups, to come together and have that safe space to speak about their experiences, because things in life will affect them, things in the workplace will affect them, and it's about having that space to speak about with people who can understand their experience and empower them in that in that in their work and outside of work as well.
Definitely. And, you know, everyone's lived experience all over the globe is going to be different, right? So it's really, from our point of view, is understanding and taking each company and really looking at the makeup and not having, like Leanne said, one solution for all. So it's, you know, in dialogue, or, you know, finding out the challenges, where, you know, where do they want to be, finding out what the pain points are, you know, finding out if it's we need to focus on leadership, finding out, and then we come up with bespoke solutions. It might be that it's the leadership team that we really need to focus on. It might be the community, it might be certain people, but I guess it's a certain type of organization that's willing to take that next step to really have those you know, vulnerable conversation. And there can be something a bit uncomfortable about it as well. Like Alistair, when you initially talked about, you know, the response to that LinkedIn post, I felt really uncomfortable for you. I was like, gosh, like, how do you manage, like, you know, you're trying to create this fantastic inclusive event, and then there's always going to be other people from different perspectives saying different things. But what Leanne and I do, and what Ocean's all about, is focusing on the individual needs of a company and supporting them. And we have so many different resources and networks that we built up to be able to do that, even down to, you know, different languages. We have coaches, we offer one-to-one coaching in different languages, because not everyone speaks English or wants to speak English. You know, there's going to be people from different classes as well. So we have financial workshops around how to manage your finances, because, you know, there's so many different assets and walks of life and color that make up a company, and that's what we're really about.
I can see Stephen's brain ticking, but I want to come to Gillian first. Stephen, I hear your brain and I see it, and I'm going to come back to you, and me and Fran are going to ask you some questions on that. But Gillian, from a Northern Ireland perspective, are we doing enough to include everyone in STEM? And can you tell us a little bit about your role within, obviously, STEM within Northern Ireland?
Okay, so I work with the Royal Academy of Engineering.
Hold the microphone up.
A bit closer. Sorry.
Yeah.
So I work with the Royal Academy of Engineering, so our role is there as a national academy to drive sort of talent and diversity across engineering and technology. But specifically within Northern Ireland, I work with the Women in STEM Steering Group, which is a Department for the Economy sort of sponsored group, led by a chairman, Dr. Brian Keating, and a co-chairperson, Professor Eileen Harton-Jones. And so what that group is doing is building on sort of a report which Matrix and the department published in 2018, which sort of very depressingly sort of confirmed what we all knew, was that despite the sort of the massive proliferation of sort of activity that was going on around the region, that actually the dial hadn't changed in yet another 10 years. So we were still sitting at that point where, you know, at age sort of 16, 65% of girls were dropping out of the STEM pipeline versus 6% of boys at that same age. So that sort of that report and steering group that was sort of sponsored and put in place to try to start to really address these sort of the whole inclusion in STEM bit in a really intentional way. So yes, all of the activity that's happening, it's all exceptionally sort of good. It's well-meaning, it's coming from the right place, and every little thing makes a difference. However, if you've got something that is so systemic in terms of the scale and the sort of the embedded issue that we have around sort of STEM girls, Northern Ireland, it's going to take more sort of to address that. So for the first time, I think what we have with the Women in STEM Steering Group is a real drive, and actually I see for the first time myself real intention on the part led by the Department for the Economy at this point, but also obviously hoping to include Department for Education in that. So a real intention to now actually make a difference. So they've set a target for 2030, and with that, the aim is that we broaden everything out, but we can't go about this in the round. So back to the earlier point, I think, or actually, sorry, if the speaker made around this, you know, if we help everyone, you know, gender will get fixed. It won't. Okay, so because we've been helping sort of lots of things for long periods of time and nothing has actually changed. What we need to do is something really in that space And, you know, it can't be dealt with in the round because it just hasn't worked. So dealing with it really specifically and putting sort of the action plan in place that the department's working on at the moment, that sort of rising tide will rise all ships. So what we're saying is the work that we're doing. So take a very, very practical example. The department has sort of partnered with the Royal Academy to roll out a STEM or an engineering education program across Northern Ireland in primary schools for P1 up, so that we start to normalise the conversation around engineering. So we start to sort of influence children from the earliest possible opportunity in the system, if you like. Work with local businesses to do that, work with the families so that within society we start to normalise that. We don't just go in and work with the girls in those schools, we go in where we work with everyone. So in that, the boys in that class who don't associate with the engineering sort of future, those from sort of poor socioeconomic backgrounds, those with sort of whether it's neurological, whether it's physical, whatever level of challenge, that everyone has sort of an equal sort of role to play in sort of participating in that scheme. So really it becomes sort of something that is accessible to everyone. And once everyone can play, you know, that's really, so that's one very small practical example, but it's the first time actually where I've seen an evidence-based report with the sort of real challenge in it to government, but actually with government then putting the sort of the plan in place to start to address that in a whole way. So,
and that's good, because sometimes the fear would be that we're papering over the cracks, aren't we? We're kind of we're celebrating a few good examples, but not wondering about the wider picture. And it seems to me that this is not exclusion, it's inclusion of everyone with the things that you do in the school, which sounds great as well. Fran, over to yourself. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, thank you so much for that. And I love how you are intervening that at that early age, and it's all about action now and thinking, okay, what practically are we going to do, instead of consistently having conversations. And while conversations are great and they are needed to be able to implement action, being able to see that plan being put in place is really great. And now I'm keen to hear from Stephen and what companies and leaders are doing out in the US to try and tackle diversity and inclusion and ensure that there is more of that in the workplaces. Can you give comment?
Yeah, and thanks very much. I mean, it's a huge issue, which is across the globe. We have the fortunate conversations, I suppose, where we work with job seekers, with American career centres, job centres that we'd be familiar with in the UK, and employers. And, some of the things that we're seeing are that employers are saying, just as was mentioned earlier by one of my fellow panelists, that, they need talent. They really need to get talent, but they can't find the right person for a role. Yet what we're looking at the other side is that there are over 27 million people in the United States who are claiming unemployment insurance. Now, there's an issue here that, there are huge barriers of entry for people to find and keep jobs. And part of that reason is that there is an unconscious bias that exists. There are employers who, look at the name on a resume and it doesn't fit them. They look at the social media profiles of people and, their face doesn't fit the company. And that's the harsh reality. There is a conversation that needs to happen around this, but what I'm really seeing is that, we're running the risk a little bit of moving the needle of discrimination from one area to another. And what I mean by that is that we're seeing a lot of things like, quotas being recommended for companies to look across their organization, to look across their company, and to put a target, for example, of 25% diversity across the company. But the challenge with that I'm hearing is that what we're doing is we're selecting people again based on their age, their race, or their gender to suit a quota. So we've moved the diversity pin from one area over to another, where I believe that, we need to be cognizant that there has to be 25% or whatever it is. There needs to be a diverse workforce. What we need to do is talk about how we make sure that we are appreciating people for their ability within roles to do a role, and the best person gets the job. But that requires us to then increase opportunities right across the career pipeline to make sure that everybody from every walk of life gets that opportunity to apply for that job and to be the best at that job. So a lot of our work is kind of looking at what are the things that we can do to educate employers, to educate educators and society and communities, to talk about the wider issues, which is what opportunities are we giving to people? What education are we giving to employers? And a big part of what we do is the removal of that unconscious bias from the initial part of the recruitment process. Why do employers have to see the name, the age, the gender, the race of anybody who's applying for a job? They should be looking at their skills. They should be looking at their ability to conduct that job. And only at the point when that employer absolutely needs to see that information, should they see that information. And one of the things that we do is we track then where interviews are being cancelled. We can then pick up on trends to look at, what are the core issues that are existing within the job space, and how do we then address that? So, I mean, here it's in the States, there is conversation that's happening, and right across the world, there's conversation that's happening. But as we've been talking about, we need to make sure that we are not papering over the cracks, that we are not just paying lip service to this, and we're not moving the needle from one area of discrimination over to another.
Thank you so much, Stephen.
Yeah.
And it's actually interesting you mentioned the anonymization of CVs. It's a huge conversation at the minute, and it actually relates back a little bit to that story that Virginia told about Howard and Haley. So again, a conversation I see all the time on LinkedIn, and it's maybe something that could be explored further.
Absolutely, and we've all got some sense of bias, and also use words that we shouldn't. I remember saying this in the last thing that we did, and I don't mind using this as an example because that's calling myself out. I'm calling myself out here. I used the word guys in an event where there was 85% men, 15% women, and Suki Fuller, who some of you guys will know, ladies as well, sorry, turned around to me and said, when I was emceeing the event, you can't use that word. And like, this was about 5 years ago, and I was like, what do you mean? And I was like, I felt a bit embarrassed that I was being called out, but it was the best place for me to be called out because there was 100 people listening. They all learned at the same time as I did that for some people in that room, that made them feel marginalized from the conversation. So it's for all of us to admit our failings and understand that there's ways for us to improve. Is that right?
Yeah, it's just funny, just that bit about the unconscious bias. It reminded me of, I did some work with Ulster University. The School of Engineering there has done a lot of work with their Athena Swan over the past few years, which is a charter mark for diversity and inclusion. But one piece of research, and I can't cite it exactly, but it was that male undergrad students received a fuller and a more prompt response to emails from lecturers, regardless of whether the lecturer was male or female. But that was a piece, and that was the kind of sort of ingrained bias that existed. So we were looking at sort of normalizing language in the classroom and in course materials, throughout the whole agenda or the whole sort of curriculum, really. But that's established and known, and it's remarkable.
Isn't that remarkable?
Yeah.
I would have never known that. I don't know if anyone in the room would have known that before, but it's important then. Oh, Patrick's putting his hand up. You do.
Yeah, just throw some, which was remarkable. You were talking, you said, man, and something, yourself, and that's your background, your work, you do it every day. So it's in our psyche. You correct yourself. So it's about those conversations of change, awareness to make that, a real world thing. So people are thinking about it. Like,
absolutely.
It's just happened today. So it's not, you're not to blame.
Yeah, totally. Like, so for anyone listening at home, because the microphone might not pick up on that, Patrick was talking about words that you sometimes need to correct yourself on as you're saying them. And I think that's fair as well. But Kola, I'm going to come back to yourself. A question that's come in from the audience here in the room. We're using old school WhatsApp, by the way, so we're kind of trying to pretend that we're on Zoom in real life. Kola, a question comes in: psychological studies show that lasting ways of opinion shaping and developing unconscious bias start in childhood through what children hear and see. Do you think that enough is being done in the early years of education to address the issues of discrimination, both conscious and unconscious? And how long do you think it will take for a meaningful change in society and the working world to be seen? That sounds like an absolute ginormous question, but if you can answer it,
It is. So that's a stunner of a question. To take the first part of the question in terms of do we think enough is being done in early years? I can tell you no, it isn't. And I'm sure some of you would have seen the debate around even teaching Black history in schools. And some parents are saying, you know, we don't want our children exposed to this. We don't think we should be bringing politics into school. But this is not politics, you know, and this is what really amazes me and amuses me about the situation. When we start talking about equality and people talk about it as though it was identity politics, it isn't identity politics. It is human rights, and it is something that everyone should engage with. My children go to, my youngest son goes to a school, and somewhere in Hertfordshire. And some of the parents, the Black parents this year wrote to the school to say, how are we going to teach Black history? Are we going to celebrate Black History Month in October? Because we celebrate everything. We celebrate, you know, we bake cakes and celebrate everything for anything on the school calendar. So we brought the issue to school around Black History Month. And the answer we got was very, you know, fudgy. It was, you know, we would sort of talk about it at assembly. We would have some sort of Black photographer coming to school. It was very wishy-washy. So when we look at, to answer the question in terms of from early years, is enough being done? No, because we have people that go through the entire education system. I didn't go to school here. So, but the people that I know, don't even understand the role that the British, you know, old British Empire even played in slavery. What is taught is that the British abolished slavery. What isn't taught is that the British were very instrumental in setting up, you know, the whole transatlantic slave trade to even start with. So we don't teach a very complete view of history as it pertains to the Black people's contribution from that earlier stage. So that is very, that's something that should be corrected and should be done. And I know there are a lot of groups that are advocating for this, and some schools are doing a great job in being proactive in teaching it. And the reason why that is important is because, as the person who asked the question said, unconscious bias starts from very early ages. As we say, you know, the clue is in the name, is unconscious. I'll give you an example. At the school my son goes to, my best friend's son goes to that school as well. And one boy said to him, he said, boys that look like you, boys with brown skin, do not go to senior school here. And this was a 4-year-old. So this was a 4-year-old child in reception, turned around to my best friend's son and said, boys that look like you, boys with brown skin, do not go to senior school here. Now we can say all sort of things around that, but essentially it's things that this boy is picking up, whether at home, whether from observing the lack of diversity or whatever within the school. But there's something that's made a 4-year-old think that a brown child does not belong in that school. And that is why it's really, really important. In terms of how long will it take for us to achieve equality in society? If we take a look at gender, I think there's a study that came out last year that said it would take about 200 years for us to achieve gender equality. And now this is gender equality that we've been talking about for years, and we've invested a lot of money into. Now, if we think about racial equality that we've only just started to really engage with on a society level, just because of the unfortunate death of George Floyd last year, then we know that we have a long way to go. However, I'm an optimist, and I am dialed into this conversation because I'm the mother of 2 Black boys, and I'm committed to ensuring that when my sons come into the workplace that they would work in is very much different from the workplace I came into and the workplace that exists today. So while it will take a long time, because it's taking us a long time to get to the ruts that we currently have today, I also believe that there are lots of positive steps that are being taken in that direction. When I look at the fact that we're even having this conversation today is a step in the right direction. A lot of conversations before last year would have shied away from the word Black. I mean, people would not even say the word Black. They would sort of couch it under ethnic minority or underrepresented. But the fact that we're having a very open and honest and transparent discussion, an authentic discussion today, shows that there is really an increased appetite to engage with this at a societal level. But at some point, we would have to stop discussing it and start putting things into action. We need to see that coming through in some of the decisions and policies we make in workplaces in terms of who comes in, who gets through, who gets promoted, who gets put on that role, who gets sponsored, who gets mentored, who gets invested in, because that is how real sustainable change would happen. But it's going to take a long time. It's, we didn't get here overnight. It's not going to get fixed overnight.
I want to ask Sarah and Leanne, because we do have to jump in 1 second, and obviously you've been waiting very patiently in the background there. And I just think, obviously, from a grassroots level, the work that you're doing, going into business and looking at wellness is what we've been talking about all day in terms of building that culture and how important it is to find talent and keep talent. And I'm assuming, obviously, you can't really keep talent unless you have an understanding of who works in the business. One question that's come in from the audience is, could the government be doing more to make females stay in work after having children? Now, obviously, I know that possibly you would go, well, does that relate to wellness? But of course it does, because obviously you have to have, I'm assuming when you're doing wellness programs, an understanding of the type of cultural place and fit. So I wondered whether the government is doing enough to make, obviously, wellness part of, obviously, programs, and also including people into that as well.
Well, from my lived experience, when I didn't feel that way, and I know a lot of colleagues as well returning to work after having a child doesn't feel that way. So is enough being done? No. Can we do better? Yes. And I think, the hybrid way that we work now does afford that more flexibility that as mums, we've all been looking for, because our working life is it's often the woman that, is the one that's flexible, that maybe at the school gate at 3 and that maybe, works a little bit later. So we're really at Oshan here to create safe spaces. So be that for, people like myself, where I didn't feel that I could get support. So it's really, the company level that we're talking to. It's like, what initiatives can we put in place? What safe places can we create for this to change, and for, women coming back into the workforce to feel safe, and also people of different ages as well. So, menopause is, there's so many different things that come up at a certain age, and that's what we're all about as well. And, it's not just about women, or that's a big focus for us, women, and also, Black women and women of color, but also male mental health as well. Like, we're working with a company, actually it's 70% men. And, that also is something that needs to be talked about as well, because often men don't feel it's a place where they can talk about their emotions. So yeah, but yeah, yes.
Well, no, and that's a really good point to end on, I feel. And it goes back to the comments that were coming in on Facebook with that sponsored ad I put out, and those comments saying, here we go again. Inclusion is everyone, and making sure that everyone feels welcomed and valued within an organization. And I think all of the work that we're doing, whether it's locally in Northern Ireland or collectively that everyone is doing on the panel, individually, is making that small difference and small steps that make that conversation go a bit faster. However, going back to Bacola's point, it's a bit like COP26. At the moment, we're going, well, we only need to increase like climate, the 1.5% or whatever it is, or 1.5 degrees Celsius. And that's going to mean we're going to, really, we're not going to hit that. We're going to hit 2.6. It's a bit like, obviously, if it's going to take 200 years, we need to start acting now, don't we? And a lot more than what we're doing, because otherwise it's going to take 500 years. So I thank you all for your time. Fran, great discussion. And Chris, thank you ever so much for, obviously, your early input into it. I think it's one of those areas that's kind of forgotten about or not included in the conversation. So we're delighted to have you here as well. Round of applause to everybody here. And obviously, thank you for your time. Thank you. By all means, stay with us. We're going to drop you off, obviously, and now we're going to go to a quick diversity mark ad, which, if you watch, it'll be nice for you to see, because this is a Northern Ireland initiative, and it's about, obviously, recording, obviously, and kind of measuring where companies' diversity is at as well. So thank you for your time today, and now the diversity mark advert. Thank you.
Can we hear me again? Perfect. So I'd like to introduce you all to Nuala Murphy. So Nuala has been described by the Irish Times as one of the next generation of female business leaders in the North. Nuala is a multi-award winning professional marketer and entrepreneur and a community builder and connector by nature. As president of the Lean In Network Belfast, Nuala has led and scaled the Lean In movement across Ireland over the past nearly 8 years. As a director at the Women's Investor Ready project, Nuala, along with 3 successful entrepreneurs, started a community interest group focusing on changing the start of investment to women entrepreneurs regionally. And finally, as interim head of business at Diversity Mark, Nuala is channeling her expertise, leadership, and passion into building a more equal and inclusive society, working with companies from all sectors across Ireland and the UK. Nuala, thank you so much for being with us. I suppose I just want to really kick off by asking you about Diversity Mark, and if you could tell us a little bit about the company and what it does.
Yeah, thanks, Fran, and thanks for having me here today. I think hearing to all the different organisations and initiatives that are going on across the UK is really encouraging, and it's really great for me in the position in Diversity Mark to be able to share it with our community of signatories who've signed up. So Diversity Mark is an external accreditation for organisations to sign up to and publicly commit their efforts in building more diverse and inclusive organisations. It originated in Northern Ireland about 4 or 5 years ago and now is in growth mode across the rest of Ireland and the UK. And we're actively seeking there's an independent assessment panel, okay? So we are the facilitators to encourage and support organisations to sign up to achieving an accreditation and external and independently reviewed. There's a bronze standard. The first 3 goals focus on gender. Silver standard, we can add in extra layers of diversity as per the company's choice. And then we're soon to be launching our gold standard. Again, throughout the themes today, it's really important to note that we start with gender. However, we are very mindful that we have to consider the intersectionality of both gender and other disabilities around that, knowing that when you add in another layer of diversity on top of gender, and we've heard that through the speakers today, that things become more challenging and more complex for someone to navigate in the workplace or even in society.
Yes, and that actually leads on to my next question. I was going to ask about the observations you've had since you've been in your post, probably that being one of them.
Yeah, I think when you're as a Lean In leader, as a community interest volunteer, founder and director, you can be quite discouraged as to the lack of progress that we see across the board. But since I've joined Diversity Mark and been on the inside of organisations who genuinely are being led by visionaries and people who not only understand that this is the right thing to do, but also who believe it's good for business, and we saw the reasons for that. I think the observations are that people want to do something. There's a fear that they don't know what to do, how to do, who to talk to, how to talk to about it. But what I'm seeing in the message I want to share today is that everybody is on their own journey. Everyone has their own challenges in a business, but we have to do what we can with what we have in order to push this agenda forward. And we can't get complacent. It was mentioned earlier on about gender equality, how long it's going to take to achieve that. We have to realize that it's difficult for Black minorities in the workplace to get ahead, and there's a lack of representation. So if we can all collectively think about one thing we can do within our organizations and our roles as citizens, then there's more chance of change and effective positive change sooner.
And when you talk about positive change, do you think that in any way the pandemic has acted as a catalyst for change in any organizations, maybe with a focus on well-being or flexibility?
So I think it's really important to go to the data and see what the data tells us. Lean In McKinsey publish a report every year and have done for the past 7 around women in the workplace. And in my experience, it's pretty simple and pretty it's consistently reflected across the rest of the UK and Ireland and Europe, in fact, is that women still aren't being rewarded and recognised for the work that they do. The pandemic has shone a light on the extra work that women do, the second shift, the third shift, and also 90% of DEI leaders are women in organisations. So what does that tell us? That the work is actually falling on women in the workplace to advocate for the groups. And there's a risk there that it becomes housework, and there's a risk there that we aren't recognizing women for the work they're doing. We're not rewarding them for the work they're doing. And then for women of color in the workplace, things haven't got better since 2019. So, I can give anecdotal stories, but there's global data that has been published where there's a lot of work where thousands and thousands of people have been questioned. We just have to look at the data to what Virginia said. process it, understand it, and see what we can do with what we have in our organizations, community groups, and businesses.
I actually read something a while ago that really opened my eyes. It said back years and years and years ago, when the 9 to 5 was designed, it really wasn't meant for women to be going and doing the 9 to 5 day and raising the kids and doing all the time and doing all the chores. And that's, why now I think it's started to be a lot more recognized, that it is, 2 full-time jobs on top of one another if there's not more help there in the home.
And the pandemic added to it. So you don't even have to look back in the 50s. You look at Mad Men, people love that as a program, but actually it's probably one of the most disgusting representations of life as a working woman. And even now today, when I was starting a family, I worked in a target-driven role most of my career in-house. When I started a family, people were projecting their opinions on what I should be doing. And when you're the only woman in the room, and I'm white and I'm privileged, I get that. But when you're the only woman in the room who is ambitious and wants to grow their career, people tell you should just stay at home and be a yummy mommy. That's not on, apart from the fact it's against the law to say those type of comments, but it's not on when that's the bias you're working with. And when most of the leaders in the rooms, partners don't work, wives don't work. So they don't understand the world. So it's really about understanding and listening to the company, your employees, supporting them, rewarding them, and recognizing for the work that they're doing.
Yeah, and I'm laughing, but it's just because it's so ridiculous, and it's just something that I've heard, and it's mad that comments like that are still thrown around. But practically, then, how can organisations get involved?
Yeah, so I think the whole point of an external accreditation is that you're putting yourself out there to be critiqued and to be assessed by an independent assessment panel who have huge experience in working in organizations and supporting deploying initiatives across the diversity and inclusion lenses. So Diversity Mark is open to every organization at every size, and we welcome people to sign up and to work on what their first year plan would be to achieve the bronze accreditation. We have 10% of organizations are from across the UK and Ireland. We're in growth mode. There's a huge interest to get involved. We're also evolving as an organization. So a goal at the moment, we have an open application recruitment process for independent assessors. So people who are coming from other organizations, other experiences and walks of life to get on board, because as we grow, we need to be more representative. And that's a personal goal of mine in my interim role here, to promote and get as many people and as many networks involved and sharing those positions out there. So go to diversitymark.co.uk, sign up, get involved. Once you do sign up, you're part of a community where there's global resources and regional resources and examples of companies who have started their journeys at different stages. Some initiatives, some partnership with organizations who are working across different diversity elements, and you get part of a peer support group. So we know the benefits of peer support, be it personally and also professionally. And then we can support you through that journey to submission, and then you're on your journey, and it's it's a marathon, not a sprint, so it takes time to then move through to silver and then soon be released gold, where we'll be launching that very soon.
Brilliant. And it's so good that you not only offer that accreditation, but the support as well to actually get that. And that means it's not as an intimidating of a process for companies. So look, thank you so much for sharing that information with us and for sharing your knowledge. It's been a pleasure to have you. And thank you very much. Can we get a round of applause for Noah, please?
Thank you, Fran.
So now for the third session of our startup pitches for the Work in Progress Startup Pitch Competition, sponsored by Raise Ventures and Clockwise Belfast, where we will hear from CrewApp and CyberPie.
So I'm Cian and I'm from CrewApp. So let me dive in and tell you a bit about our founding story. So Jane and I have been a couple since 2009. She became cabin crew in 2014, where she worked with Emirates in Dubai for a year and a half, and then moved to Aer Lingus, where she currently works as senior cabin crew. And I guess over that time, what we found is that her roster uncertainty really did consume our life. So the way it worked is that she got a roster, kind of told her where she needed to be 6 weeks in advance, but beyond that, nothing. And I guess that led to a whole host of missed events, missed milestones, like a lot of stress, and to be honest, a lot of arguments which weren't that fun. But we believe our experience is one that is shared by a 1.3 million flight and cabin crew around the world. So at CrewApp, our vision is to become the global leader in AI and data-driven personalized airline rostering. So how is rostering done today? So airlines at the moment use licensed legacy software providers to do this. And it broadly consists of 3 activities. So firstly, the airline sets their schedule. So that's the airlines, the routes, the slots with the destinations. The second step is they assign the crew to that schedule, and then they publish that roster to the crew members. But we spoke to over 500 IAG flight and cabin crew, and they've told us, 80% of them have told us that this roster consistently doesn't meet their individual lifestyle needs. So the problem, following this publication, there's 3 additional activities that are interrelated that happen. So the first, crew members view their roster. 90% of them do this using an app outside of the airline system, which they pay for. Then they try to swap duties or swap shifts with each other using social media. So they post screenshots of their roster on social media. Less than 5% actually succeed in swapping that shift. And for those 5% where they do find a swap, in order to actually process it in their roster, crew operations team members need to manually process it on the airline side. This model isn't sustainable. So the airline's objective primarily is to deliver its flight schedule and meet its customer expectations. Yet the future workforce, so millennials, rank work-life balance as the second most important factor when choosing a job after salary. But in aviation, the global demand for new crew is expected to double over the next 20 years, so to increase by 1.2 million. So for us, a crisis is looming. You have crew with poor morale, which leads to lower engagement and worse performances. And that impact on the airline leads to more unplanned absences on the crew side, cancelled flights, higher turnover, additional costs, a negative customer experience, and also an impact on the airline's bottom line. And then in the grand scheme of things, not enough crew in the future to sustain aviation. Our solution at CrewApp, we're developing a cloud-based app that's a go-between between the current system and the crew. And we're utilizing AI technology to ingest this old roster data, shape it to meet and personalize the roster for the crew members, so to meet their individual needs, optimizing their well-being and the efficiency of the airline. In terms of our team, so I'm Cian, I'm the co-founder. I have 9 years experience in banking and insurance across a range of different projects. Although it does feel like I've lived in aviation and worked in aviation, having partnered with Jane. Grace is my co-founder. So she has the industry expertise, 8 years experience working with LATAM Airlines, which is the largest airline in South America.
You've got 10 seconds.
And then in terms of our expert advisory panel, we have Sean, who's an experienced HR leader with 20 years experience in aviation across different senior roles. So thanks very much, guys, and I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
Hi, Cian. Just a quick question, well, a couple of quick questions for me, actually. So where are you up to with the development of this? Is it still an idea phase, or have you got an MVP?
So we actually have an MVP. So in terms of the product itself, we have a 3-phased approach. So the first is what we call the semi-automated model. And what that basically does is it extracts the roster from the airline system. It allows crew members to swap shifts among each other, and then it automates an email back to the airline so that they process the swap on behalf of the crew members. So that doesn't require an integration with the crew member, with the airline, sorry. So at the moment, we have that MVP currently built. The next stage is the integrated model, where we build the integration layer, connect with the airline system. And then the third phase is adding on this machine learning in Python to actually personalize this roster for the crew members. So just to simply answer your question, we have the MVP of this first phase.
Okay, and how do you make money from this?
So we charge the airlines per crew member, depending on the version that they need. So phase 1, phase 2, or phase 3. So the idea is once we have the phase 3 rollout, we charge the airline a fee per crew member per month. So we're looking at $19.99. Based on the market size, that gives us a total addressable market of 511 million, let's say, globally.
If you spoke to airlines to say that and found out whether they'd actually be prepared to pay that?
Yeah, so the cost of doing this for us, so the average number of crew in an airline is 1,800. And the cost for them to do it for the 1,800 crew outweighs the negative impact of the above. I mean, if they don't have the above, you see the unplanned absences, like the cost of hiring crew, it's 10 grand per crew member. 6 times that for pilots. So we've done the calcs to kind of weigh up, will they pay this versus the cost of not having it?
Okay, thank you.
And just to add, maybe, like airlines in 2019 spent 50 billion on IT. So even though we have a 511 million total addressable market, in the context of aviation and spend, it's quite small.
Well, how does that TAM and the revenue opportunity compare to the time and the cost it's going to take to build out through your phase 3?
So I think for the phase 1, I think we're looking to get it. So we currently have phase 1. To get from phase 1 to phase 2, we're looking at 100K to raise to build out the integration layer. So ultimately, there's 4 kind of core rostering systems that airline use. So we basically need to have 4 versions of our crew app to be able to ingest the 4 different roster formats from the major players. And then to get from phase 2 to phase 3, I guess it's a learning process in terms of we need to build up the monthly rosters, manage and look at the behavior of the crew in terms of what shifts they swap, what preferences they have, with a view to then kind of shaping it. But in terms of how long it will take from phase 2 to phase 3, I guess the way machine learning works is from phase 2 to phase 3, we can have a guess, but in order to get more accurate, it's going to take a number of years to actually learn about that behavior and build up the data set of the individual crew members. Does that answer your question, Caleb?
Kind of, but when you put the TAM up there and you compare that to the revenue opportunity, and then you take the time and the cost it's going to take to build that out, and based on your exit, what are you thinking? What is it? How does that look?
So we think we can have the phase 3 up and running in 2 years, and in 2 years we hope to have 3 airlines on board. And if we have 3 airlines on board with the cost base to run phase 3, we'll be profitable from years 2 onwards. I actually have a supporting slide with the financial projections if you want me to skip on. You can take a look.
I think you have maybe a few seconds left.
So the growth in terms of the partners, so we have airlines 1 in the first year. That's fully the semi-automated model. And then in years 2 and 3, moving to the phase 3 model with the AI. So you can see from years 2, we're actually profitable with a headcount of 4 full-time staff. From year 3, 700K profit with 6 full-time staff. And then from year 4, ramping up to 12 airlines. Then we'll have the 4 versions of the rostering software built out. And then we're looking to scale beyond that. It's a case of getting on board with different airlines. Our go-to-market is targeting Aer Lingus, let's say, which is a part of a group. Once we prove the concept in a group, ideally, then we get to roll out the other airlines in that group. And it's Aer Lingus where we're really embedded and have the strong connections at the C-suite and different departments.
So, hi, I am Alison. I am the COO and co-founder of CyberPie, the first cybersecurity solution for the micro business. So meet Simon. He's a partner in a 5-person solicitor firm. They were just hit by a ransomware attack. Simon had heard about CyberPie at a Law Society event and has since signed up. He can now protect his business and his employees that work remotely from future attacks. Solicitors rely on client trust. They need to protect their reputation, and CyberPie puts the micro business owner in control of their security. 60% of small businesses will close down within 6 months of being hit by cybercrime. Cybercrime puts the micro business out of business. Our customers' problem is they're under-resourced, obsessed with cash flow, and are fearful of fraud and compliance fines. The average cost of a ransomware attack in Ireland is over 22,000 euros. CyberPie makes cybersecurity accessible to the micro business and puts the micro business owner in control of their security. CyberPie is a multi-tenanted SaaS platform that automates the delivery of security awareness training through short edutainment videos and micro tasks. Using AI, our app will provide the tech for users to check suspicious links, scan their websites and key accounts, and submit your scam is how we build the CyberPie community. There's a real gap between what an antivirus picks up and the new wave of social engineering scams. CyberPie will simplify and demystify a key business skill for the 21st century. The microbusiness sector makes up 90% of Irish and UK businesses, and cybersecurity is a global problem. Global scalability with the same content is possible through professional bodies, associations, and affiliations. Our year 1 target market are legal firms through the Law Society and occupational health professionals through Registered Physio Association, and to achieve our target of 11,000 subscriptions. The big competitors like Dendify and USecure service larger businesses, but are inaccessible and expensive. The micro business is our niche, making us the first player in this space. We give our customers the means to prove their compliance and their competency, and the Submit Your Scam app plugs the gap left by mobile security and antivirus solutions. Our business model has two revenue streams, monthly subscriptions and security audits, which sit at the top of the sales funnel. And we are the team that can deliver. My 18-year career with an international oil company means we're thinking global from the outset. With an MBA and skills in growth and strategy, I will make CyberPie happen. Andrea is a successful entrepreneur and recognized cybersecurity and data protection expert with the technical skills that allowed us to build the platform. CyberPie began in New Frontiers, and we already have 30 subscribers that continue to validate the platform. And next year, we move from our test market in Ireland into the UK. Thank you very much for your time, and I'd love to answer some questions.
Hi, Alison. Thank you for that. Just a quick question from me. Is this, you're sort of trading already? Is that correct?
We have released a beta platform.
Okay.
So it's an MVP, and we're currently not charging. It's in a freemium model to try and get user feedback on our content.
Okay, and how many people have you got on the beta test?
We have already 30, and it's growing on average between 2 and 3 per week.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Alison, forgive me if I didn't follow you completely, but with the videos and the trainings, and then the plug that you talked about, how are you protecting, from a technological perspective, people's websites or data servers, etc.?
So we don't create the tech ourselves. We use technology. We are curators, and we check what is on the market today that fits to a micro business needs. And then we will recommend and train the micro business owner on what they need to know to protect their business.
Okay, and are you making money by connecting them with the right software?
So we make money currently through, well, we will make money once we're off beta, through subscriptions, and then we are already in some discussions, but nothing is finalized, with affiliations, so that we can coordinate with our preferred suppliers.
Thank you.
So I'm going to jump in. So does that mean that you actually have a member of your team that is finding the right match? Is it from that last answer? There's
Yes.
an actual human. Okay, so can you just talk about the financial model then? What are you planning to charge, and the cost of servicing each customer? How do you plan to scale that?
So we have a subscription model where there is a freemium version, where you get limited content and limited access to the platform. Then we have a entry level, which is €15 per month, and that enables them to have a little bit more content, including some policies and templates. And then we have a premium version, which is €40, which provides them content that can be shared with their team, because the micro business is up to 10 employees, and it allows them to educate more than just the business owner. And the affiliate links would then be within our tool library, which then we would recommend through audits, what suppliers they need, what services they need. Do they need a VPN? And we would advise them, yes, you do. No, you don't. If the answer is yes, these are the 3 that we recommend that you go to. Don't use Google, and that's really our model. And this is scalable because we are looking at the best technology that is on a global scale. We're looking at US companies, Australian, Asian, and we curate and check out the content, the latest moving and changes within cybersecurity. And then those are the links and the companies that we're talking to, and we place on our website as recommended content.
Okay, but then, so me as a small business owner still has to implement it myself?
You have to implement it yourself, but we will give you the step-by-step on how to do that.
So the service, so the service I'm paying for as a small business owner is when I get to that €40 a month is because you've audited my business and you're telling me based on your recommendations which ones I should use, and then I implement it myself.
We have given you, when you get to the €40 per month, we are giving you every week different tools that will build up your cybersecurity arsenal. And then within that, you will be able to identify what support you need, what services you need. Again, I will use the VPN example. Some businesses have them already and some don't. And then we would tell you who are the preferred suppliers. We today, less than 5% of the micro businesses that we have surveyed, and we've surveyed over 250 between Ireland and North and South, are actively, proactively working on their cybersecurity. We need to educate this population to get in a minimum, and then with an ongoing subscription model, they can build up that arsenal and take back control as the cyber criminals become more strategic and more mature.